The sun, a fiery orb sinking below the horizon, painted the small town of Redemption in hues of burnt orange and deep crimson, making the dusty main street glow like a forgotten ember. Dust, kicked up by Jesse's weary horse, swirled around. His worn leather boots and faded denim jacket, a silent testament to years spent on the move, a life lived on the fringes. It had been a lifetime, or so it felt, since he'd ridden out of this valley. A young man fleeing a foolish mistake and a heart that felt irrevocably shattered. Now Jesse was back, but the weight he carried wasn't the familiar heft of a gun. On his hip, it was an invisible burden pressing down on his very soul, a yearning for something he wasn't sure still existed. The town itself seemed untouched by the relentless march of time, small and deceptively quiet, as if holding its breath. The rusty Spurs saloon still hummed with the off-key melody of a piano, its raucous laughter spilling out into the twilight. The church steeple still leaned slightly to the east, a silent sentinel against the vast sky, and the main street was still deeply rutted by countless wagon wheels, each groove a memory of lives lived and journeys taken. But Jesse wasn't searching for mere familiarity. He was searching for something profoundly lost, a shred of conscience, a piece of his former self he desperately hoped to reclaim in the place he once called home, a place he had so carelessly abandoned. He tethered his horse outside a modest boarding house, its wooden porch creaking softly under his weight, where the comforting scent of pine wood and freshly roasted coffee mingled in the crisp evening air, a stark contrast to the gunpowder and stale whiskey that had defined his recent past. His eyes, sharp and wary from years of living on the run, scanned each unfamiliar face he encountered, searching for a ghost from his past, a hint of recognition. But there was no one. Only the gnawing fatigue that settled deep in his bones, and a profound loneliness that clung to him like the dust on his clothes, a constant companion. That night, Jesse lay on the hard bed, the unfamiliar mattress a stark reminder of his rootless existence, listening to the wind whistle mournfully through the window panes. Memories of Mary, of carefree days under the vast western moon, of whispered dreams and shared laughter, flooded his mind like an unstoppable river, each ripple a pang of regret. He wondered, with a desperate ache, was she still here? Did she remember him, or had time erased him from her heart? Or was he merely a faded shadow in her distant past, a forgotten chapter in a story that had moved on without him? The following morning, a crisp western breeze carried the scent of sagebrush as Jesse wandered through the dusty streets, his spurs jingling softly, a sound that once heralded danger but now only echoed his solitude. He passed the general store, its wooden facade weathered by sun and wind, where the aroma of fresh bread and warm spices hung heavy in the air, a comforting scent from a life he once knew. He continued to the blacksmith's, where the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil echoed powerfully, a testament to enduring labor. Finally his steps faltered, slowing to a halt before a small, unassuming farmhouse nestled behind a cluster of ancient cottonwood trees. Its white picket fence, though slightly weathered, was adorned with a riot of wild, blooming flowers, sunflowers reaching for the sky, vibrant purple coneflowers and delicate blue flax, a splash of defiant beauty against the rugged landscape. Jesse's heart tightened in his chest, a familiar ache mixed with a jolt of recognition. It was Mary's farm. It had to be. He stood there, motionless, a figure frozen between space and time, a silent observer to a life that had continued without him. Then, a familiar silhouette emerged from the farmhouse, stepping onto the porch with a basket of wet laundry. Mary. She was still Mary. Her rich brown hair, perhaps a shade lighter from the sun, neatly braided and tucked away, her clear blue eyes still holding that unwavering spark of resilience he remembered. Yet her face now bore the subtle lines of time and responsibility, etched by years of hardship and quiet strength. She moved with a practiced grace, hanging laundry on the line, each movement deliberate and efficient. Suddenly, a small boy, a whirlwind of energy, darted out from the house. His brown hair tousled like a wild bird's nest, his eyes wide, bright, and brimming with innocent mischief. He looked about 6 years old, dressed in worn overalls, clutching a crudely carved wooden horse, his treasured companion. He laughed, a pure, uninhibited sound that cut through the silence of the morning, a sound that was both foreign and strangely familiar. And then Jesse's gaze, which had been idly observing, locked onto those eyes. Those eyes, they were uncannily like his own. The same deep hazel, flecked with gold, the same thoughtful depth that belied his young age, and even the slight squint when the boy looked towards the rising sun, a habit Jesse himself possessed. A jolt, like a current of raw electricity, shot through Jesse's spine, leaving him breathless. He stood transfixed, rooted to the spot, unable to tear his gaze from the child, from this impossible reflection of himself. Mary, sensing his presence, turned, her eyes meeting his across the sun-drenched yard. A long, agonizing moment of silence stretched between them, a chasm of unspoken history, broken only by the rustle of wind through the cottonwood leaves and the frantic, almost painful beat of Jesse's own heart. Mary's face drained of color, shifting rapidly from initial surprise to profound shock, then to a flicker of raw, protective fear. She instinctively pulled Billy closer, her arm tightening around his small frame, as if to shield him from an unseen danger, from the very presence of the man who stood before them. In the days that followed, an invisible chasm, wide and deep, separated Jesse and Mary, a silent testament to the years of absence and unspoken pain. He often lingered in town, a solitary figure, sitting quietly on the worn bench outside the general store or nursing a single whiskey in the dim light of the saloon, his gaze constantly, almost compulsively, drawn to Mary and Billy whenever they appeared. Mary, in turn, tried desperately to avoid him, her movements swift and deliberate whenever she saw him, but sometimes her eyes would inadvertently meet his across the dusty street or over the heads of the townsfolk. In those fleeting moments, her gaze carried a tumultuous mix of emotions, reproach for his past actions, deep sorrow for what had been lost, and perhaps, just perhaps, a faint, stubborn ember of a love that had never truly died, merely lay dormant beneath layers of pain. Billy, with the boundless, innocent curiosity unique to childhood, often found ways to approach Jesse, drawn to the quiet mystery of the stranger. The boy was bright and remarkably quiet for his age, observing the world with an intensity that mirrored Jesse's own. His eyes, those hauntingly familiar eyes, always held a spark of interest, a nascent connection, when he looked at the man who seemed to watch him from a distance. One afternoon, as Jesse sat on the wooden bench outside the general store, whittling a piece of wood, Billy walked by, his small hands clutching his treasured wooden horse, and accidentally dropped it. The horse clattered to the dusty ground. Jesse, without a word, bent down, picked it up, carefully dusted it off, and gently handed it back to the boy. Billy, true to his quiet nature, said nothing, but his big, round eyes, filled with an innocent wonder, met Jesse's. Then, a shy, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. That brief, almost imperceptible touch of their hands, that innocent, trusting gaze, stirred something profound and unfamiliar within Jesse, a warmth he hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging he thought he had forfeited long ago. Old memories, sharp and vivid, resurfaced like a slow-motion film reel, playing out in the quiet corners of his mind. He saw Mary as she was then, her hair catching the golden light of the setting sun, her laughter echoing across the vast, open fields. He remembered their stolen moments, the long, languid afternoons spent on the edge of the golden wheat fields, the whispered promises exchanged under the vast, star-dusted moonlight, the fervent, clumsy kisses behind the old church, each one a silent vow. He remembered the Mary of old, the girl with windswept hair and a radiant, unburdened smile. He also remembered himself, a reckless, impetuous young man, full of untamed fire, but also full of foolish mistakes that had led him down a dark path. Now he was a man weathered by countless storms, his soul scarred by violence and regret, and she was a strong, resilient single mother, her spirit forged in the crucible of hardship. Between them lay the vast expanse of time, a chasm of years, of divergent choices made, and a profound, unspoken secret that hung heavy in the air. Both carried unspoken words, a multitude of unanswered questions, and deep, aching wounds that had never truly healed, festering beneath the surface of their guarded composure. One rainy afternoon, the sky weeping a steady, mournful rhythm, Jesse found himself drawn, almost magnetically, to Mary's farm. He stood beneath the porch overhang, the scent of wet earth and damp wood filling the air, watching the raindrops patter softly on the tin roof, each drop a tiny echo of his own internal turmoil. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mary opened the door, her face tired but still resolute, her eyes shadowed with a weariness that spoke of endless burdens. She invited him in without a word, her silence more eloquent than any accusation. The small house was surprisingly warm and inviting, a sanctuary from the storm, smelling faintly of freshly baked goods and the comforting aroma of a wood fire, a stark contrast to the cold, lonely places he had known. Billy sat quietly by the crackling fireplace, absorbed in his own world, drawing intently on a piece of worn paper, his brow furrowed in concentration. Jesse looked at Billy, then at Mary, a silent question in his gaze. He didn't need a formal explanation, no dramatic confession. Every detail, every nuance was painfully, undeniably clear. Those eyes, so uncannily like his own, the slight curve of that innocent smile, even the precise, deliberate way the boy held his pencil. They were all echoes of himself, undeniable proof. "Mary," Jesse finally whispered, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion, barely audible above the drumming rain. "The boy. He's mine, isn't he?" Mary turned away, her shoulders trembling almost imperceptibly, a silent tremor that betrayed the immense emotional weight she carried. She took a deep, shaky breath, gathering every ounce of her formidable strength, then slowly, deliberately, turned back to face him, her eyes, though brimming with unshed tears, meeting his with a fierce, raw honesty. "Yes, Jesse, he's your son." Her voice was a pained whisper, barely a breath, filled with a raw, agonizing truth. "After you left, after you vanished without a trace, I found out I was pregnant. I searched for you, Jesse, I truly did. But you had disappeared like a ghost, leaving no forwarding address, no hint of your whereabouts. I had no choice but to face it alone, to raise him on my own, to be both mother and father to a child who deserved so much more." Tears, long held back, finally streamed down Mary's face, tracing paths through the dust of her unspoken grief. She spoke of the difficult, lonely months that followed his departure, of the profound fear that had gripped her, the crushing weight of her profound loneliness as she navigated motherhood without a partner. She spoke of Billy not as a burden, but as a beacon of light, of his remarkable intelligence, his quiet strength, and his boundless, unconditional loving nature that had sustained her through the darkest days. Jesse listened, every word afresh, stabbed to his heart, his chest aching with a crushing weight of regret. He felt a deep, agonizing remorse, a searing, belated regret that twisted his gut. He had missed 6 precious years of his son's life, 6 years he had squandered living in the shadows of his own making, a life of violence and empty pursuits. He had abandoned Mary, leaving her to bear every hardship alone, to raise their child in a world that offered little mercy to single mothers. The truth was laid bare, raw and painful, but amidst the agony, there was a fragile glimmer of hope, a faint promise of a future that might still be redeemed. The truth about Billy, a revelation that shook him to his core, weighed on Jesse's heart like a colossal stone, a physical ache that never truly subsided. He spent days wandering aimlessly through the sparse woods surrounding Redemption, the rustling leaves echoing the turmoil within him. He gazed at the distant, jagged mountains, their peaks shrouded in a perpetual haze, trying desperately to untangle the chaotic thoughts that swirled in his mind, a maelstrom of regret and burgeoning hope. On one side was his sinful past, a dark tapestry woven with violence and lawlessness, the ingrained instincts of an outlaw, the constant gnawing fear of being hunted, of his past catching up. On the other side were Mary and Billy, a vision of a small, fragile family, a profound opportunity for redemption, a chance to shed his old skin and become the man he was truly meant to be, a man worthy of their love, he recalled with a shudder. The cold, desolate nights spent on horseback, the endless stretches of lonely plains, the brutal, chaotic gunfights that had left bodies in their wake, the haunted faces of those who had fallen because of his choices or at his hand. He remembered the profound hollowness in his soul, the gnawing emptiness that had defined his existence as he lived a life without purpose, without connection, driven only by survival and fleeting gains. Now Billy, with those innocent eyes so much like his own, was a living, breathing reminder of another life, a life he had foolishly forsaken, a future he had almost thrown away. Jesse was torn, a man split down the middle. Did he, a man stained by so much darkness, truly deserve this fragile happiness, this chance at a normal life? Could he truly abandon his old path, sever all ties with his violent past, and commit to living an ordinary, honest life? His greatest fear, more terrifying than any bullet or prison cell, wasn't death itself, but the chilling prospect that he would somehow, inevitably, hurt Mary and Billy again, that his past would always be a shadow looming over them. He feared that his old life, the one he had tried to escape, would relentlessly pursue him, bringing danger and heartbreak to the ones he now cherished more than his own life. But then, when he thought of Billy's clear, innocent eyes that held no judgment, only a nascent trust, and Mary's unwavering strength, her quiet resilience in the face of so much adversity, a powerful flicker of hope ignited within him, a burning desire to change. He wanted to stay, to make amends for every wrong, to painstakingly rebuild what he had broken, to become a father, a man worthy of their love and trust. The internal battle raged, a fierce, silent struggle between the encroaching shadows of his past and the beckoning light of a possible future, between the instinct to flee and the desperate need to confront his demons. Just as Jesse was slowly, painstakingly, coming to a profound decision to stay, to finally root himself in this quiet town and embrace the fragile hope offered by Mary and Billy, an unexpected and brutal turn of events shattered the delicate peace. One crisp afternoon, as he was helping Mary mend a section of the weathered picket fence, their hands brushing occasionally, a group of unfamiliar gunmen, their faces hard and unyielding, rode into town, their presence a dark stain on the sunlit streets. They were not just any men. They were faces Jesse knew, chilling remnants of the old gang he had abandoned years ago, ghosts from a past he had desperately tried to outrun. They had tracked him, their relentless pursuit finally bearing fruit, somehow discovering his quiet hiding place in Redemption. The news, grim and terrifying, spread through the small community like wildfire, carried on the wind, whispered from door to door. In moments, the entire town was plunged into a desperate panic. The peaceful townsfolk, accustomed only to the rhythms of farm life and the quiet hum of their daily routines, had never faced such ruthless, hardened outlaws. Their fear was palpable, a suffocating blanket. Jesse knew, with a sinking certainty, that he couldn't hide any longer. Their arrival wasn't a coincidence, it was a deliberate hunt. They weren't just looking for him. They would harm anyone, anything that stood in their way, their path of destruction leading inevitably to Mary and Billy. Mary looked at Jesse, her clear blue eyes wide with terror, her face pale. "You have to go, Jesse," she pleaded, her voice a desperate, trembling whisper, barely audible. "You have to go. They'll hurt you, they'll kill you, and then they'll come for Billy too." Her hand instinctively reached for his, her grip tight, a silent plea. Jesse shook his head, a grim resolve settling over his features. "No, Mary, I'm not going anywhere." His gaze, firm and unwavering, shifted towards Billy, who was still playing innocently in the dusty yard, completely oblivious to the encroaching danger, his laughter a stark contrast to the growing tension. "I won't abandon you two again. Not now, not ever." The words were a vow, a promise etched in his heart. The gunmen, their shadows lengthening in the afternoon sun, began to systematically search every house, their rough footsteps echoing ominously. On the wooden porches, their harsh shouts reverberating through the quiet streets. Jesse knew with a chilling certainty that time was running out. He had to act, not as an outlaw, but as a protector. He had to defend his newfound family. Only thing that mattered to him, no matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice. Jesse knew, with a clarity that cut through his fear, that he couldn't allow those ruthless men to get near Mary and Billy. The thought of them suffering, of their innocence being shattered, was a pain far greater than any bullet. He made a choice, a definitive life-altering decision. He would face them. He was no longer the fugitive outlaw, running from his past. He was a father, a man desperately seeking redemption, ready to stand his ground. With a grim determination, he retrieved the old, familiar gun he had kept hidden beneath the floorboards, its cold steel a familiar weight in his hand. He checked its ammunition, the metallic click echoing in the quiet room. Mary watched him, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a dawning understanding. "Be careful, Jesse," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, a desperate plea. He nodded, his gaze softening as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a silent promise. "I'll be fine. You stay inside with Billy. Don't come out, no matter what." His voice was steady, belying the turmoil within. Jesse stepped out of the farmhouse, into the harsh glare of the late afternoon sun, his silhouette stark against the dusty backdrop. He faced the approaching gang, their faces etched with malice and anticipation. They recognized him instantly, a collective snarl rippling through their ranks. "Jesse, so you finally showed your face." The leader, a burly man with a scarred cheek, bellowed, his voice echoing menacingly. "Thought you could run forever, did ya?" A gunfight erupted, shattering the fragile peace of redemption. The air instantly filled with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the deafening roar of gunfire. Jesse, with the honed instincts of years spent on the wrong side of the law, moved with practiced agility, a blur of motion. He ducked and weaved, taking cover behind the sturdy trunks of the cottonwood trees, firing with deadly, precise accuracy. He was no longer fighting for stolen money or a fleeting reputation, but for a far greater, more profound purpose, to protect the two people who had given his life meaning. The sounds of the battle reverberated through the quiet town, a terrifying symphony of violence. The townsfolk, paralyzed by fear, huddled in their homes, their windows dark, their prayers silent. Mary, her face pressed against the cold glass, clutched Billy tightly to her chest, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She listened to every shot, every shout, each sound a torment. She prayed, a desperate, fervent prayer for the man she had loved, the man who was now fighting for their lives. Finally, after a tense, brutal standoff that seemed to stretch for an eternity, Jesse, despite his wounds, managed to take down the last of the gunmen. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ragged sound of his own breathing and the distant cries of a frightened bird. He was wounded, a searing pain in his shoulder, blood seeping through his torn shirt, but he stood firm, a solitary figure amidst the dust and scattered debris. He looked towards the farmhouse, his gaze unwavering, where Mary and Billy waited, their safety now secured. He had made his choice. He had sacrificed. And against all odds he had won. After the confrontation, as the last echoes of gunfire faded into the vast western sky, the town of Redemption fell into a profound, almost reverent silence. Slowly, cautiously, the townsfolk began to emerge from their homes, their faces pale, but their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and a newfound, profound respect for the man who had stood between them and certain destruction. Jesse was no longer just the hunted outlaw, a ghost from a troubled past. He was the man who had protected them, their unlikely savior. Mary rushed to him, her steps faltering slightly, then quickening, her heart overflowing with relief and a love that had never truly died. She embraced him tightly, her arms wrapping around him, her face buried in his shoulder. Her tears flowed freely now, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude and overwhelming emotion. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice choked with tears, barely a whisper. Jesse nodded, his own eyes misting as he held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his, a balm to his wounded soul. "I'm fine," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, his arms tightening around her. Then Billy, his small face etched with concern, ran up to them, his eyes fixed on the dark stain on Jesse's shoulder. "Does it hurt, Papa?" the boy asked, his voice clear and innocent, his big eyes filled with genuine worry. Jesse was momentarily stunned, a wave of emotion washing over him. "Papa?" He looked at Mary, who through her tears offered him a tender, knowing smile, a silent confirmation. He knelt down, wincing slightly at the movement, and pulled Billy into a tight, fierce hug. "No, son, Papa's fine," he whispered, his voice thick with a love he had never known he was capable of. For the first time, he called Billy his son, and the feeling was warm, complete, a profound sense of belonging that settled deep within his bones. It was as if a missing piece of his soul had finally found its way home. From that pivotal day forward, Jesse decided to stay in Redemption, not as a temporary refuge, but as his permanent home. He was no longer a wandering outlaw, haunted by his past. He became a family man, a devoted father, a loving husband. He and Mary, working side by side, rebuilt the farm, their hands calloused but their hearts full. They planted crops in the fertile soil, their efforts a symbol of new beginnings, and raised livestock, their days filled with honest labor and the simple joys of life. Jesse taught Billy how to ride a horse, patiently guiding his small hands on the reins, how to shoot a gun responsibly, not for violence, but for protection, and more importantly, how to live an honest, principled life, a life built on integrity and love. Jesse and Mary's old love, tested by time and hardship, was rekindled, burning brighter and stronger than ever before. They didn't need flowery words or grand gestures. Their connection was deeper, forged in shared pain and newfound hope. They communicated through glances, through gentle touches, through the quiet, comforting presence of each other. Jesse had found his true redemption, not by running from his past, but by bravely confronting it, by embracing his responsibilities, and by building a new, meaningful future with the family he had almost lost. Under the vast golden western sunset, their small family, with Billy as their enduring bond, a living testament to their love, finally found a profound sense of peace and enduring happiness. A silent promise was exchanged between them, a sacred vow for a new life, a life where love and healing would always prevail, a testament to the power of second chances.